And we are launching into a new sermon series. It's called Definitions of words that are foundational to the marriage relationship, but not just for marriages. As we're going to learn today, these are the words that should define our relationship with God. So I want to clarify from the very start this morning, this series isn't just for married people. I don't want you to tune me out if you're not married or if you don't plan on ever getting married. Or maybe you were married at one point in time, but it ended real ugly, and you're like, nope, been there, done that, no thank you. If you are a Christian, a follower of Jesus Christ, married or not married, I think this sermon series should apply to you, and let me explain. In Ephesians chapter 5, the Apostle Paul quotes a passage from Genesis chapter 2. There in the garden, God has just created Eve using a part from Adam, using one of Adam's ribs. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one. And then Paul adds in the very next verse, this is a great mystery, a profound mystery, and I take it to mean Christ and the church. The union of man and woman in marriage, it's a mystery because it contains a truth. It's a lot like a parable, an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. Marriage contains a truth about Jesus Christ and the church. The divine reality that is hidden inside the metaphor of marriage is that God ordained a permanent union between His Son and the church. Human marriage is the earthly image of that divine plan. It was God's will for Christ and the church to become one, and it's also God's will that our marriages reflect the very same pattern. Collectively, we are the bride of Jesus Christ. In a different letter to a different community of believers, the Apostle Paul says it this way: I am jealous for you with a godly jealousy, kind of like a father would be. He says, I promised you to one husband, to Jesus Christ, so that I might present you as a pure virgin to Him. And then in the book of Revelation, we read this part of John's vision. Let us rejoice and be glad and give Him glory, for the wedding of the Lamb has come, and His bride has made herself ready. Fine linen, bright and clean, was given her to wear. We are Jesus' bride. Jesus is the groom. We are the bride. Listen, I'm really excited because on the Thursday night leading up to the last part of this sermon series, we're going to be hosting the music and drama team from Roanoke Christian Camp. And they're going to be performing their original musical. It's called Here Comes the Groom, right here on this stage. Mark your calendars, Thursday, August the 2nd, 6:30 p.m., one night only. Here comes the groom, here comes our groom. The marriage relationship is a perfect picture of Jesus Christ and His bride, the church. Unfortunately, if you look around, and you don't have to look very far, marriages are struggling all over the place, and it's not good. It doesn't honor the Lord very much because He has designed something so much better for us. So for this series, what we want to do as a church is dig into these vocabulary words, define these words, and let's allow God to strengthen our marriages, and in turn, we will grow in our relationship with Him. Also, as a church, I want you to think about this. We want to, as a church family, we want to invest in the lives of those who one day will be married, so that years later, they don't say, well, I wish I had known that back then. So right now, if you're hoping to be married one day, you will be equipped with some spiritual truths that will help prepare you for a relationship that would honor God. Jenny and I, we went to a wedding last weekend. Our neighbor's daughter, Kelly, got married. And I got to tell you, they went all out. They had a huge blowout party in their backyard with a big tent on Friday night, the night before the wedding. Catered food, music. They were giving golf cart rides to people to get to and from their cars because people had to park all over the neighborhood. Jenny and I just walked next door. The wedding itself, it was on Saturday night at the Brooklyn Arts Center. Formal wedding, black tie optional. It was the most fancy the most elegant wedding that we've ever been to, and Jenny and I have been to tons of weddings. It was like a fairy tale wedding if you're into that kind of thing. Jenny even made the comment, I've never seen this many flowers at a wedding, and I'm just thinking, yeah, I usually don't pay attention to that. I'm really thankful that my 10-year-old daughter wasn't there to get any ideas. Let me ask the women a question, if I may. You don't have to raise your hands, but ladies, I'm wondering, how many of you, when you were a little girl, you fantasized one day about having a fairy tale wedding? You dreamt about the perfect wedding with the perfect guy, living in the perfect house. You even named your perfect children. Guys, you probably had a little different fantasy when you were a teenager or maybe in college thinking about the possibility of getting married one day. And we won't go there, but it is what it is, right? Now, a question for everybody. How many of you are still dreaming to this day? It's interesting how sometimes our expectations of what we hope marriage will be like, it seems to fall short of what it actually is. And when you look around, you have to admit that many marriages are just not working. It's scary when you read about the statistics, and depending on what survey or study that you read, somewhere in the neighborhood of 50% of marriages don't make it. That's a scary statistic. I mean, think about it. In any other area of your life, if there was something important that you could lose, and there was a 50% chance that you would lose it, don't you think you would prepare and do everything possible to eliminate that potential danger? If you have children, and there's a 50% chance that they're going to get killed in a car accident today, you would be like, all right, kids, we're walking home through the woods, staying off the streets and away from cars. For those peeps out there who like the beach and love to swim in the ocean like myself, if there is a 50% chance that you're going to get attacked by a shark down at Wrightsville in the shark's house in the ocean, you probably won't go in with those odds. But what about YOLO? Right? I don't care about YOLO. You only live once. I'm not going in the ocean with the 50-50 chance of losing a limb. With the odds of being what they are, and with so many marriages struggling these days, I think the reason is because people are not spiritually prepared to live a marriage that honors God. People are not spiritually prepared. Let me ask you, is it even possible to have a God-honoring, amazing marriage? Is that possible? Absolutely and completely yes, it is possible. But it's not likely if you follow the path that so many people follow today. That's why we're taking some time to dig into these words. This series, it's adapted from a series of lessons on marriage from Life Church. What defines a God-honoring marriage? What defines a faithful relationship with God? And by the way, this series is also brought to you by the letter P. I know we just had the pit, prison, and palace. Sorry, we are stuck on the letter P. There on your bulletins, you can see the words that we're going to define over the next month leading up to the Amped Vacation Bible School. Today we're going to look at priority, keeping the priorities in their proper place in our relationships. Next week we're going to talk about pursuit. How should we be pursuing the Lord? And how do we continue to pursue our spouses after we're already married? Week number 3, we're going to talk about partnership. What's the difference between a covenant and a contract? We're going to dig into leadership and submission and see how God plays this out as we define partnership. And then week number 4, it's extremely important. We're going to talk about purity. How do we live a pure life in an impure world? Today, as we talk about priority, I want you to think about a common belief in our culture. This is a common belief. Little kids are taught this from fairy tales and Disney princess movies and love stories. It's this common idea that to really be fulfilled in life, you have to meet the one. You have to meet the one. To really be happy, to have a life that has meaning, you have to meet that one perfect person that gives you goosebumps anytime you get near them. Whenever you're around them, the hair on the back of your neck stands up, right? Every song on the radio makes sense. You're at the CVS, you're checking out, you want to get every sweetheart, lovey-dovey card for your one. It's this idea that says to really be fulfilled in life, you have to find the one, which has to be a strange concept for people in cultures with arranged marriages. I don't know if you heard this news, but just last week, Justin Bieber got engaged. He must have found the one. Baby, 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 oh, right? Baby, 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 no. The goal for today's message, instead of believing, I think she's the one, I just met the one for me, I want you to be thinking in terms of, I just met the two. I just met the two. She's so amazing. She loves the Lord. He's amazing. He has a job. I think I just met the two. I think I just met the two. He's the two. She's the two. Why would you be psyched to meet your two? Because God is your one and your spouse is your two. God is your one and your spouse is your two. Even our Lord and Savior says this pretty clearly when someone asks him the question, what's the most important commandment? He said, above anything else, make God number one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself. This is the definition of priority. To have a marriage that honors God, we must put God first in our lives, and then our spouse is second. And I'm going to make a confession right now. I was real tempted to have all of the married couples this morning turn to each other and say, you're my number two. Blue. You're my number two, Blue. But then I thought maybe not. So for those of you this morning who are not married, but you're hoping that one day you will be married, I think this should be your definition for priority. I will seek the one while preparing for my two. I will seek the one while preparing for my two. A story is told about a girl who grew up, she was a Christ follower, but then she went off to college and she walked away from Jesus. And she got into all kinds of partying, drinking, drugs, everything that went along with it. And one day at a frat party, she met the most amazing Christian guy. So she called her mom and said, Mom, this is the guy. I mean, he's perfect. He's godly. He's a leader. He's amazing. And her mom said very tenderly but truthfully, knowing about the drastic change in her daughter's lifestyle, the mom said, sweetheart, you got to understand something. If he's everything that you're saying, a guy like that is not looking for a girl like you. Andy Stanley says this, become the person you're looking for is looking for. What? Become the person that you're looking for is looking for. In other words, I'm looking for someone who has God as priority number one in their lives. So right now, I'm going to seek the one. I'm going to live for God. My whole life is going to be devoted to Him. He is King. He is first in my life. He is preparing me for someone that I can serve Him with, but He is always my one. I will seek the one while He prepares me for my two. For those of you who are married, this is your definition of priority. I promise God will be first. He will be first priority and my spouse will be my second. I promise God will be my first priority and my spouse will be my second. And this comes from Genesis chapter 2. The context, like we said, Adam is there in paradise and there was no suitable helper for him. And what does God say? He looks at the situation. What does he say? This is not good. It is not good that man is alone. So he puts him into a deep sleep, takes out a rib, formed Eve, and Adam saw her. And what did Adam say? Whoa, man, right? Get it? That's an old joke. I apologize. Old jokes. Woman. This is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife. He leaves his father and mother and they become one flesh. They become one flesh. When you're growing up, your primary earthly relationships are with mom and dad. You always honor mom and dad, but your priority shifts from that being your primary relationship to now it's your spouse. God is your one, and your spouse becomes your primary human relationship. You see, the problem is when you believe that your spouse is the one, you will idolize them. You will end up idolizing your spouse when you believe your spouse is the one. It's like what we talked about last week with patriotism. It's okay to be patriotic and appreciate your country, to love your country, but when you put your allegiance to your country above your allegiance to Jesus Christ, your country becomes a god. It becomes an idol, and you end up worshiping that idol. This is from the preacher Craig Groeschel. He says, with our marriages, with our spouse, you idolize them, and then what happens is you demonize them. You idolize them, and then you end up demonizing them. Oh, you're so amazing. You're perfect. You're everything I wanted. Hey, ladies, he's so laid back. He's so relaxed. And then you get married, and then you demonize them. He's a lazy bum. He won't get off the couch. He won't mow the yard. You idolize and then you demonize. Dude, she's so organized. She's so driven. She's amazing. She's the one. You get married, some time goes by, and then you demonize. She's driving me nuts. She's driving me crazy with her list. She keeps all these lists around the house, but she always leaves the car on empty. She won't put gas in the car. Can she put that on her list, to put gas in the car? You idolize and then you demonize, and here is the bigger problem. Here's the bigger problem. The whole time you're asking your spouse to meet a need that they were not designed to meet. God is designed to be your one, and He is able to meet the needs of that top priority, not your spouse. Together, you serve God, but your spouse is not designed to meet the need that only God can meet. Something that happens early on in relationships. You make your girlfriend your priority. Your boyfriend is your priority. Maybe when you get married, you're still in that top priority spot, but guess what happens? Some kids come along. And then suddenly, instead of the marriage relationship being the priority, under God, suddenly the kids are the priority. The kids become the priority, and sometimes this happens, the husband gets a little jealous, and he feels like, well, I guess I'm getting pushed out of the picture here, and so maybe he pours himself into his work, and maybe the wife pours herself into her kids, the kids, or maybe she drops them off at daycare and she pours herself into her work, and suddenly the marriage relationship gets put over on the shelf, gets put on the back burner. You can use your imaginations for a second. Fast forward to your deathbed. I know that might seem like a morbid thought, but if you are fortunate enough to have some time to prepare for eternity, which is kind of what we should be doing right now in life, but think about it. If you live a long life and you can see the end coming, that's where the priority becomes very, very clear. For people at the end of their lives, the priority is God and family. And maybe they're not a believer. And then the question is, well, if there is a God, I wonder where I stand with Him. You see, God becomes priority. Where do I stand with God? Is my family around? Where are my loved ones? God and family. God is my number one priority. My spouse is my number two priority. If I'm not married, I'm going to seek God while He prepares me for my second most important priority. If I don't ever want to get married, it's all good because I'm still seeking my one. Whenever anything takes the place of God or takes the place of the priority of the marriage relationship, even something good, when those priorities are out of order, your life, your marriage can never be what God intended it to be because you're not living. Think about this. You're not living according to His ordained order of priority. And there are a lot of things in this life, in this world, that will compete for your one and your two. A lot of things will compete for your one and your two, all kinds of idols. And we've seen it in so many relationships, from work to video games, to Pinterest and Facebook, sports, friends, your cell phone, hobbies, Netflix, fantasy football. And God is like, why are you devoted to that thing? Why is that your one? Spouses are getting jealous because our priorities are out of whack. And it's like I said, it's not always bad things that take our eyes off of God. It's not always bad things that destroy marriages. Sometimes it's good intended things that are out of place in the relationship. So here's the last big thought with this lesson. On the back of your bulletins, we have to protect the priorities. We must protect this house, protect the priorities. Listen, if you're going to get married later on in life, I want to plead with you today to embrace this. God will always be your one, and your spouse will always be your two. If you're married and you're struggling in any way right now, I think we could probably trace it back to this root issue that you're not putting God first. You're not seeking Him first. Do you want your marriage to grow? Serve Him together. Seek Him first every single day. You pray together. You be centered around God's kingdom. Seek Jesus together. Put Him first. And then make sure that you come together and your relationship with each other is second. I'm going to tell you, I'm not a marriage counselor. Even if I stayed at the Holiday Inn last night, which I didn't, but I'm not a marriage counselor. Jenny and I, we're not experts. We've been married 18 years. I think a lot of you could do a better job standing up here talking about the priority of the marriage relationship, especially with this next point that I'm going to try to convey. Because Jenny and I, we are right in the thick of it right now in our lives. But here's some practical advice about protecting the priorities. If you're married and you have children, sounds like a television show. If you are married and you have children, do not be child-centered in your marriage. Don't be child-centered. Children are very important. Children are a gift from God. But if you want to love your kids, you make your marriage a priority. I mean, one of the best ways that you can be a blessing to your children is to strengthen your marriage. I saw this a little bit with my own parents. And some of you, unfortunately, you lived it. Your whole life revolved around the kids. The kids are the common interest that keeps you together. And then one day as the kids grow up, you look at each other and you're like, who are you? And what did you do with that person that I married 25 years ago? And it feels like all of a sudden you don't have any connection with each other. There's no intimacy because your whole life has revolved around your children. Here's what some of us need to understand and remember. Children are a temporary assignment. They are a temporary assignment, and I know that might get some of you guys riled up. I know I'm going to get some pushback on this because we'll always be moms and dads to our children, but they are a temporary assignment. You will have them for 18, 19, 20, 21 years. They might be hanging around for 30 years, who knows. But at some point in time, you nudge them out and you say, you go and live your life for the Lord. This is why a man leaves his father and mother. They are a temporary assignment. Start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. Temporary. Your marriage, however, is as long as you both shall live. Or maybe you said in your wedding vows, till death do us part. It's not until we're not happy anymore. It's not until you're not meeting my needs anymore. It's not until something better comes along and I'm going to trade you in for a different model. It's till death do us part. Your marriage is a permanent, God-honoring commitment, and that's why we have to continue to prioritize it even above the children. We have to. That doesn't mean we don't feed the kids and we don't give them baths and we don't put clothes on them, especially for some kids out there who I think would rather roll around with no clothes, but you honor the marriage by putting it above your children. There was a knock the other day, and Jenny and I, we don't answer the door anymore because 9 times out of 10 or 10 times out of 10, it's for Macy or Owen. It's their peeps on the street, their friends. There was a knock at the door. Owen answered it, and he talked to his homeboys, Cody and Cameron. Then he came into the kitchen, and he was like, "Can I go play soccer with Cody and Cameron?" And I was like, "Sure, but do you want to put some clothes on first?" Dude already had put his shoes on to go play soccer, but the only other thing that he had on was his underwear. So we will put clothes on our kids. We'll feed them lots of chicken nuggets, and we'll throw a lot of pizza at them. But if you want your children to succeed in their marriages, show them what a God-honoring marriage looks like. God is the number one priority. And then we take time for each other. When everything pulls us away, we protect a block of time to just talk. If you don't talk, you can't have any intimacy. And here's some more practical advice. Have a date night. Bring in some reinforcements, aka the grandparents, and have a little getaway night. And maybe you think immediately, man, we can't afford that, or we don't have the time. Here's another quote from Craig Groeschel. I'm going to blame him. He says, "If you're lazy, you'll make an excuse. If you love, you'll make a way." I don't have the time. We can't afford. If you're lazy, you'll make an excuse. If you love your spouse, you'll make a way. And Jenny and I did something at the beginning of this calendar year that has been a huge blessing. We're 18 years into it. We made a decision that once a week we are going out together, just the two of us, by ourselves, without the kids. And Macy, rightfully so, she calls it Mommy and Daddy's date night. We had to claim some time in our schedules, and now we have to protect that time. And leading up to this year, we've been real hit and miss with a date night. And we've used all the excuses. No time, no money. We've got to protect the priorities. If you're at a point right now in your marriage where you're struggling, listen, as your church family, we acknowledge the hurt and the pain, and our hearts are breaking with you. What I want you to understand today with part one, it's simple. It's a simple concept to hear. It's simple to see it on paper, but it's not easy. We put God first. We just do it. We put God first, and we protect that priority. We talk to Him first. We read His words first. We serve in His kingdom first. We give to Him first. We allow the Spirit to guide our lives, and it's all for His glory. God is first. And then we work hard to protect the priority of the marriage. We work harder at it today than we did yesterday because there are more obstacles and there's more competition for our priorities. Just for a minute, I want to put a challenge out to the men because I feel a little more freedom to talk to the guys. And I'm 40, I'm a man. To the men in this room, to the men of this church family, take responsibility. Step up and take responsibility to protect the priorities because you guys are the protectors. Now, I'm not saying that women are not protectors. Just think about the illustration of a mama bear and her cubs, right? You don't want to go there. But to the men, protect the priorities as protectors. If someone breaks into your house and attempts to attack your family, how many of you would fight back? Yes. Without a doubt, we must protect this house. We will die for those we love. We will die for those we love. But think about this. God also calls you to live for those you love, to live for them every single day. Husbands, here's your calling. Love your wives just as Christ loved the church. Love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. We protect the priority at all cost, because in this life you can never be fulfilled until you finally meet the one. You can never be fulfilled in life until you know that the Lord God, that he's your one. God is your one, and your spouse is your two. If I'm not married and I'm never planning on getting married, I will always honor God as my first priority. If I'm married, my spouse will always be my second priority under God. If I'm hoping to get married one day, I will seek God first while he prepares me for my two. And I will protect those priorities with everything I have.